Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's session, the third day of the Judicial Diversity Summit. Today's title is Judicial Diversity Tomorrow. The 2021 Judicial Diversity Summit is presented to you by the California Judges Association, California Lawyers Association, and the Judicial Council. My name is Tristan Higgins, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the CEO and founder of Metaclusive LLC, and today I'm excited to be here as the incoming chair for the Diversity Outreach Committee of the California Lawyers Association. So I get to be the MC for today's session. Right, so it is my pleasure now to introduce the panelists for our discussion, Get Creative. They are incredibly accomplished judges and impressive humans as well. And they have been specifically recruited today to talk to us because of their background. So I'm going to go ahead and read a real legitimate bios for them. I'm not going to skip over it. And I want to encourage you to pay attention because the reason that they are here is very much in part because of their bios. All right. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order. And first, I'm going to introduce Judge Maria Evangelista, and hopefully we'll be able to get her spotlighted. Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Judge Maria Evangelista was elected to the San Francisco Superior Court in March of 2020 and was sworn in of January of 2021. She is currently assigned to the United Family Court and recently joined the Diversity Inclusivity Committee of the California Judges Association, one of the sponsoring organizations for our summit. Prior to her election, Judge Evangelista held a variety of roles at the San Francisco Public Defender's Office over the course of 17 years, both inside and outside the courtroom. In her role as a deputy public defender, she tried over 50 jury trials to verdict, worked with the Clean Slate Unit and collaborative courts, including Behavioral Health Court, Veterans Court, Drug Court, Criminal Justice Court, and the Intensive Supervisor Court, which provide wraparound services and aim to provide clients with alternatives to incarceration. As an attorney, she was an active board member of the San Francisco La Raza Lawyers Association and sat on the board of La Raza Centro Legal. Judge Evangelista was born in San Francisco to parents with no formal education who immigrated to the United States from Jalisco, Mexico, initially as farm workers. She grew up a block from the Hall of Justice in San Francisco's South Market area. Before earning her JD at Vanderbilt Law School and becoming one of the first Mexican-American women to graduate from that institution, she earned her undergraduate degree, Phi Beta Kappa, at San Francisco State University, where she majored in political science and minored in criminal justice and clerked at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office as a public policy intern for 2 years. She completed her undergraduate work as an Assembly Fellow for then Assembly member Tony Cardenas in Sacramento, before working as a public policy clerk at Lassa, Monroig, and Vive in Washington, D.C. In law school, she clerked at Baker, Donaldson, Behrman, and Caldwell in both Nashville, Tennessee, and Washington, D.C. Apologies to those firms if I have messed up their names. She also did a brief stint at the San Diego City's Attorney's Office, which I forgot to ask her about since I was there as well. And she's the first Mexican-American woman elected via ballot to serve as a judge in the San Francisco Superior Court. Welcome, Judge Evangelista. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Judge Jayne Chong-Soon Lee, who is going to be our moderator today. We'll see if we can get her highlighted. Hello, Judge Lee. Judge Lee was appointed judge by Governor Newsom in December 2019 and is currently the supervising civil judge at the Superior Court of California, San Joaquin County. She graduated from Yale University and UCLA School of Law. She has taught at Stanford Law School, published law review articles currently used in first-year law school classes, and was an adjunct professor at Golden Gate University School of Law. She is the author of a Matthew Bender multi-volume treatise. I mean, that's just amazing to me. I remember looking at those. So a multi-volume treatise, as well as a contributor to various CEB treatises. She's a frequent lecturer for CEB, PLI, the California State Bar, and various law schools. She served on curriculum committees for the Center for Judicial Education and Research, executive committees of the State Bar, California State Bar. Currently, she serves as the chair of the Probate and Mental Health Advisory Committee of the Judicial Council. Welcome, Judge Lee. Next, I get to introduce Judge Terrie E. Roberts. Judge Terrie Roberts was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the San Diego Superior Court on October 25th, 2019. There she is. Hello, Judge Roberts. On behalf of the San Diego Superior Court since May of 2008, making history by becoming the first African-American woman to be appointed as a commissioner in San Diego County. Judge Roberts currently presides over family law IC calendar and has previously presided over various calendars involving civil restraining orders, family support, misdemeanor arraignments, traffic arraignments, small claims, and unlawful detainer matters. Prior to her appointment as a commissioner, Judge Roberts served as San Diego County Deputy District Attorney from 2001 to 2008, handling various felony and misdemeanor cases, including serving in the sex crimes unit, where she prosecuted cases involving sexually violent predators. Prior to joining the district attorney's office, she was a sole practitioner and handled primarily criminal defense and personal injury matters. Prior to opening her law practice, she worked as a business litigation associate for the law offices of Beatrice Kemp, and also worked as a deputy public defender for the San Diego County Public Defender's Office from 92 to 95. Judge Roberts is very active in her community and in teaching locally and statewide. In 2014, she was awarded President Barack Obama's Call to Service Award for continuous service to the San Diego community. In 2008, she was the recipient of the San Diego County Bar Association's Outstanding Service by a Public Attorney Award and the recipient of the Community Service Award from the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association in 1994. Since 2009, she has taught bench conduct and demeanor for temporary judges on behalf of the San Diego County Superior Court. And since 2015, she has taught newly appointed judicial officers from across the state during the new judges orientation program on behalf of the Judicial Council of California, another one of our sponsoring organizations today. Judge Roberts also serves as a faculty member for the mandatory qualifying ethics course required for judicial officers statewide, and is on the implicit bias product work group, as well as the qualifying ethics 8 work group on behalf of the Judicial Council. Judge Roberts is married and has 2 amazing daughters, ages 21 and 20. And last but not least, since we're going alphabetically, I am excited. Welcome, Judge Roberts. And last but not least, I want to bring on Judge Kristen L. Rosie. Hello, Judge Rosie. Judge Kristen Rosie has been on the bench since 2007 and serves as the Chief Administrative Law Judge for the California Department of Insurance. Judge Rosie is also a mental health hearing officer and Judge Pro Tem for the Alameda County Superior Court, and is a senior adjunct professor at Golden Gate University. Prior to taking the bench, Judge Rosie spent 12 years at the Public Employment Relations Board, where she represented the agency at the California Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. Judge Rosie is active in a number of judicial organizations, serving as the vice president of the International Association of LGBTQ+ Judges and chair of the National Association of Women Judges LGBTQ Committee. Judge Rosie is also past chair of NAWJ's Administrative Judiciary Committee and New Member Committee. She holds a position on the Executive Committee of the American Bar Association's National Conference of Administrative Law Judiciary, and serves as a commissioner on the ABA's Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Commission. Judge Rosie is passionate about equal access to justice. She currently serves as vice chair of the California State Bar's Council on Access and Fairness, you may know it as COAF, where she divides her time between expanding loan repayment options for law students and working to diversify the law school pipeline. In 2021, the California Supreme Court appointed Judge Rosie to its Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the bar exam. Judge Rosie holds an AB or BA, I may have a typo here, I don't know what an AB is, but maybe Judge Rosie will tell us, from Smith College in Women's Studies and Psychology, a JD from the University of California Hastings College of Law, where she was a public interest scholar, and is completing her master's in judicial studies from the University of Nevada, Reno. Obviously, she follows the school of thought that you can never be too educated. Welcome, Judge Rosie. And with that, it is my really just great pleasure to turn it over to Judge Jayne Lee to lead us through this discussion. Judge Lee?
Thank you very much. And I first wanted to just start out. We're going to talk about journey to the bench. And Judge Roberts, if you don't mind giving us maybe a quick 5-minute story of your journey to the bench and we'll be able to fill a lot of it in with questions later on.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion. As was indicated earlier, my my entry onto the bench was by being appointed as a commissioner by the San Diego Superior Court judges. And that came about from judges that I had appeared in front of encouraging me to apply to be a commissioner. I had grown up in the San Diego County Courthouse as a baby attorney, as a public defender, and then was in private practice, and then was in the DA's office and was back in court frequently. And so I was encouraged to apply, and I did. And I think that I probably was successful in getting the position because I was detached from getting the position. I was enjoying working in the DA's office so much. I was in the best assignment I had in the sex crimes unit, doing really challenging cases and really believing I was helping a lot of people. But I was honored to be offered the position to join the bench in April of 2008. And I have been with the bench since then, working in various aspects of our courthouse, and then having the honor to be appointed by Governor Newsom in 2019. And there are a lot of stories in that, and I'm sure that we'll be able to get to it, but that's how I made my way to the bench. But I have wanted to be a judge for a long time. I felt that even when I was an attorney, I would be in court and I would think, I wonder what I would have done in that case, or I agree with what the judge did, or I don't agree with what the judge did. I would have done something differently. So I started, before I even applied or even considered the bench, I had just started thinking about being a decision maker in the courtroom. And so that continued that interest, and that ended up growing into a desire and an objective. And I also, at one point, while a commissioner, I ran for an open seat. I was not successful, and luckily I still had my job as a commissioner. And this last time in May, exactly May 1st, 2019, I submitted and I had applied for the bench a couple of times, and the door had not opened for me, applied to be a judge. And the door had not opened for me. And this last time on May 1st, 2019, I decided I was going to try one last time, and I hit the submit button and said, that's it. And in October, 6 months or 5 months later, I was appointed. So I was just very thankful, and I'm very happy, so happy to be able to do the work and to be able to continue to serve the citizens here in San Diego. So I don't know if I spoke too long there, but I'm happy to give more details as we go on. So thank you.
Judge Roberts, that was perfect. Thank you so much. Judge Evangelista, could you share a little bit of your story with us?
Sure. And Judge Roberts, I just have to say congratulations. Your story is really inspirational to me.
Thank you.
It really is. It's very touching, actually. So my background and experience is my parents had come to the United States from Mexico to work as farm workers in the 60s. My dad had come as and was invited, actually. He had a ID card to work as a farm worker here to pick crops. And then when they were no longer picking crops, they were asked to leave. And they had no formal education at all. And my dad had started to build a life here. And when my mother was pregnant with me, she was deported. Not in the formal sense, but they used to do catch and release. And my dad brought me back, brought my mother back while she was pregnant, and decided to hide in a neighborhood in San Francisco up north where they weren't likely to get deported. So it was a small area in the south of Market area, 2 blocks from what's called the Hall of Justice in San Francisco. And so that introduced me to my first experiences to the criminal justice system. You know, at the very young age of 3, I'd had a very negative experience at the Hall of Justice, and it didn't leave me scarred. What it did was, as I'm sure a lot of people feel when somebody you love is hurt, is you feel like you want to stand up for that person. And so I had made up my mind right then and there that I was going to be a lawyer and I was going to work there. And that's what I ended up doing. I worked in both offices, at the district attorney's office and the public defender's office. But just make no mistake about it. I knew very well that as a little girl, I was going to have to cover more ground than anybody else trying to do what I was trying to do in one generation, given my very limited resources. And not just understanding that there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me that worked in the law in that building or as judges, but even women at the time didn't have the same type of treatment that men did in that type of career. So I had to get extremely creative and persistent with the resources that I did have. In my particular case, I ran twice. The first time I received approximately 46% of the vote. And then I ran again in March of 2020, where I was successful. I ran for an open seat that time, where I won with 64% of the vote. And then the pandemic hit. Interestingly enough, I just finished my new judges orientation, and 10 of the 12 classmates in that class were elected on or about that same time frame. So I expect to see that people or attorneys running for election more. And it was so joyous for me in my journey, the campaign. Not only was it a way to honor my parents' legacy, which although they didn't have a formal education, they were an extremely important part of California, of society, of the fiber of what makes everything go round. And it was a love letter to my hometown of San Francisco, which is, some people will say is irrational love, but the sticky sidewalks and the diversity and the thoughtfulness of everybody that lives in the city, completely irrational love. And when I stood up and said I wanted to run, my community, not just Latinos, but you know, people from every community in San Francisco stood up and ran with me. It is absolutely the best job I've ever had, and I'm currently assigned to family law in San Francisco Superior Court.
Judge Evangelista, thank you so much. I am just so delighted to be here with all of you. I love your stories. I love the background. And in a way, I feel like all of this is a love letter to the bench. And so, Judge Rosie, if you could share your story with us.
Sure, and thank you. And thank you to the California Lawyers Association and the incomparable Tristan Higgins for inviting me to share the screen with these amazing judges. You know, we talked a little bit when we first got together. You know, my path becoming an administrative law judge is a little bit different than everyone else's. I had spent my first 12 years as an attorney in a state agency. And when you do that, you know what administrative law judges are, and most people don't. So I knew that the position existed. And when I thought about becoming a judge, I looked at it from the perspective of an out lesbian in my, you know, late 30s, early 40s. I had I'd had a difficult teenage years. My parents found out I was gay. They kicked me out. I was homeless for a while, and I put myself through undergrad and through law school. And if you listening to my bio, you know that neither school was particularly affordable. So I took out quite a few student loans. And so when I was looking at becoming a judge and knowing that for the route for most LGBTQ folks getting on the bench was in fact to be elected, there weren't a lot of LGBTQ judges who were appointed. And I knew that with my student loans and a public sector salary for the prior 12 years, that running for election, especially in the Bay Area, was going to be really hard. So I looked at alternatives and other ways that I could, be a bench officer, and becoming an administrative law judge made sense. I had worked with them. I had seen them. There were administrative law judges in the agency that I had spent the first 12 years in. So it seemed like an easier track and a more affordable track for me at the time. And I will say I was in my late 30s. I also thought it was highly unlikely that I would be appointed at that age. So it also seemed to make sense to sort of get that background. And then once I became an ALJ, I found out that, as we'll talk about later, that it really is the best job in state service. So my path is a little bit different than everyone else's.
Judge Rosie, thank you so much. And again, all of these stories were so inspiring, and I'm so grateful that you shared them. So now we're going to go into specific questions. And when we put this together, we tried to figure out what would all of you who are here today want to know. And so Judge Roberts and Judge Evangelista, we're first going to start out with judicial elections. And I'm going to ask Judge Evangelista, why did you decide to run for election?
It's a $1 million question. I got asked that question so much when I ran. I actually had printed the application. It was sitting on my desk a couple of months before I actually ended up running. And although I had what I believed was the content for a very strong application to be a judicial officer, and I had had a breadth of experience in the courtroom amongst the varying, offices, government, I still really didn't feel confident about my chances of getting appointed for actually a few very good reasons. One, initially, although I had spent a lot of time with my nose in a book and trying cases, I'd failed to become politically involved in the mechanisms used to endorse and appoint the judge, and I didn't know any better. I didn't have the benefit of having a close mentor, as I know many people do. I didn't have a mentor for both the application in terms of strength and weakness and polishing it, or the process of how the process happened in order to demystify it. For me, it was completely foreign. I was very insecure about that. And to add to insecurity is I didn't print the application until I was ready to apply, which is a huge mistake. I would tell anybody, even if you're not interested necessarily in applying, knowing that it can be a possibility for any attorney, take a look at it, pull it up and print it out and take a look at it and see what kinds of things they're looking for in an application. I didn't feel like turning in an application that would reflect poorly on me. So although I felt like I had the nuts and bolts of it, I really did not feel like I had a secret sauce. And I knew there was a secret sauce. I just didn't know what it was. And then lastly, statistically, I knew my chances were slim to none. I thought to myself, in San Francisco, with a bench of approximately 53, 54, when was the last time a Mexican-American woman was appointed to the San Francisco bench? Judge Georgie, who has Italian and some Mexican heritage, Italian and Mexican heritage, I think it had been almost two decades since she had been appointed, and there was nobody else. When was the last time a public defender was appointed to the bench directly from the PD's office? I can only think of one. And San Francisco wasn't LA. We didn't have all the seats to open up. So those were the reasons why I decided to run.
Okay, thank you very much. Judge Roberts, I understand from your bio that you ran also, and if you could just share with us why you decided to run for election.
Yes, thank you. I had applied for a judgeship initially in 2000, I believe it was December 2007. And I was not, I didn't get any traction on that. And then I was encouraged to apply for a commissioner position and was successful in getting that in May of 2008. But I still wanted to be a judge where I would have the ability to hear, I wouldn't be limited in the types of cases that I could hear. As I was as a commissioner. So an opportunity presented itself in 2012. And I ran for two reasons. One, I wanted to try and become a judge. And two, I ran for the principle of it because there was this perception that these open positions for election were reserved for individuals coming from the district attorney's office. And a lot of times they would know about the position because certain people on the bench had informed them about the position. And so it was just an expectation that the chosen person would just walk on and have that seat. And I decided just to challenge that. And it was very, a lot of people told me, you're crazy to do that, even though you're a commissioner. The best title to have when you run is a deputy district attorney. The district attorney at the time, even though she was my former employer, she could not endorse me over her current deputy. So it was a tough race. I ended up raising money, and as I'm sure Judge Evangelista will tell you, it's very difficult to go out and ask people for money, and it's just uncomfortable, really. But we did pretty well, but I just didn't. In the end, I lost by about 7 or 8 points. And I don't know how much, I have to say this, that I got the endorsement of the Union Tribune here, which is the major paper here. But unfortunately, 3 days before the election, apparently there was a push to change that because it was determined that I was a Democrat. And 3 days before the election, they changed the endorsement and said it was a mistake all along that they had endorsed me. So that was really difficult. And so I did not win the election. That was really difficult, especially to lose in that way, where I had the biggest endorsement that everyone goes for, and then to have it taken away from me 3 days before the election. So that was why I did it. And I still, afterwards, some people told me, oh, it's really going to be hard now to ever get appointed because now you weren't elected. And so it was really looked at as a black eye. And I just decided otherwise, that no one's going to dictate what's going to happen to the dreams that I have. And I just continue to do the work to be the best commissioner I could be and do the best work I could do. And I applied again under Governor Brown. I was not successful for whatever reason. And then like I said, I applied the third time under Governor Newsom. So I know we're just talking about elections, but that I said that to also say that there was a consequence for me in getting into that race, not being successful, and then being looked at as a candidate that it affected me negatively in being considered a worthy candidate for consideration in that next administration. This is just based on what I was told. And that may not be, and I hope that's not the case. And I hope that would not be an experience others would have, but that was my experience. But I don't regret going for that position, because since that time, there have been other females here in San Diego who have run, and a couple of them have won. And where it was usually a male, Caucasian male, who would always be running. So I don't regret what I did.
Judge Roberts, thank you so much. And that actually leads to my next two questions, and I think you've actually answered some of them, which is, what do you think the pros and cons of running for election are? Because again, it is a decision, and I do think that it has to be a calculated decision. And what lessons have you learned from running for election? And Judge Roberts, if you just wanted to add a little bit, I know you started to get into it, and then I'm going to turn to Judge Evangelista.
You definitely, it is a calculated decision. And I think if I had thought further about it, I probably would not have done it initially. But I've always, part of me was to challenge the system, to challenge what had always just been accepted. And so that's just part of who I am. And so I did it. But I definitely, I would definitely advise that you definitely want to think about it long and hard. Definitely have your ducks lined up in a row, have a campaign manager, have people that are going to work for you, help get the word out on your behalf, have a theme that you're going to have every time you go out, because as a judicial officer or even as a judicial candidate, there are ethical rules that you have to abide by. You can't commit to a certain position. And so you definitely want to be aware of that. And even since 2012, they have added rules. So you want to absolutely be aware of all of the ethical parameters that you have to make sure you stay within. And that includes people who work for you. So you can't just say, oh, well, that was my campaign manager who wanted to say that in that particular flyer. No, it's all going to be on you. So you want to definitely make sure you are aware of that. And ask yourself what's your end game. What if it doesn't work out, what's your plan? What's your next step? And be prepared if it's something that you have to, if it is viewed as a negative, if you're not successful, how you're going to address that. And so that's the best advice that I can offer. Hopefully, if someone is going to run, you're going to be successful, as Judge Evangelista was, 64% of the vote. But just have your plan B ready. And lastly, I would say, don't give up. I am proof of that I had a lot of doors closed. And I just never gave up on myself. And if you have that, then that's huge, to have the confidence in yourself and not to give up on what your goals are, regardless of any failures that we have along the way. We always learn from them.
Judge Evangelista, if you could share, because I know that you ran twice. And so if you could share, both the pros and cons and what lessons you've learned.
Well, there were some lessons to be learned. Although I weighed, sure, the pros and cons. I felt so much joy running that I hate to even call them cons, but I like to just think of them as things that you need to check off your checklist. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. So let's just call it the pros and the checklist. And there was some consequences. How about that? In terms of the pros, I had never felt the amount of joy that I felt when I ran. I'd never felt happier, other than when they told me I was expecting twin girls. That phone call, I couldn't feel the ground under me. Some people call it adrenaline. I think for me, it was just joy. For me, reconnecting with my own community. San Francisco was my hometown, and I had grown up and spent so much time in every neighborhood, in Chinatown, in Hunters Point, in the Mission, North Beach. And when I said, is there room on the broom for a judge like me? The community said, yeah, there is. And they ran with me, and they uplifted me, even when, you come across, negativities or obstacles. Unintended consequences that I made some really amazing lifelong friendships. I had always felt like it was a little bit hard to meet people like me. I felt a little bit like a unicorn. But when I ran, I found a pool of lawyers in the community and others who shared my personality traits, likes, and interests. And, I made a lot of lifelong friends that I hadn't had before. And also, I think because I ran, I had, and I still have, a direct sense of accountability for every single vote that I received, because I actually solicited every single vote. I went to their houses and left door hangers. I asked them at the bus stops to please give me a chance and vote for me. So, the community didn't vote for me because I had the most money or had something to promise them. They voted for me because they trusted me. And it's made me so humble, and it's made me so much believe in the system. And I actually appreciate the accountability, because when I come in, I have that in the forefront of my mind every time I put the robe on. In terms of the checklist, the things that you have to do to win, because we're not calling them the cons, is of course money. You have to figure out how much does it take to win a race in your district for that type of seat. And there may not be anything comparable, because it may be that in your district judges don't run. So that might be difficult. You're going to have to contact the Department of Elections and then look up to see how much money they've raised. It's also going to take a lot of time, because the time is going to go not only into soliciting the endorsements of your local, state, federal electeds and community leaders, other judges, unions, bar associations. You're going to have to actually call for those endorsements, and you're going to have to call and raise that money. You're going to have to get up at 5 a.m. And stand at the bus stop handing out flyers or holding your sign, and then go to bed at 1 after you're done, finishing out those questionnaires. And as Judge Roberts has mentioned, there is a risk, and this isn't meant to discourage you. It's just meant for something that you need to be conscious of. It is a risk when you run and you don't win, for lots of reasons. You can run, and if you don't win, but you ran in a way where you maintained your dignity and you followed the canons and you didn't burn bridges, because you may run again or still be a good candidate for appointment, I would recommend that that's the way to go. But you always run that risk that if, you're pushing that edge, you may be possibly considered what some would say is damaged goods, or if you have to run again, then that might make some people not want to support you or endorse you the next time around. As I indicated, I ran twice. The first time I did run against an incumbent, and the second time I did run for an open seat. And I would absolutely say it is much better to run for an open seat than it is to run, a contested election for lots of reasons. In so many ways, I'm glad I didn't win my first election, because having run the second time and winning and coming in, and still understanding that I have to maintain these relationships with my colleagues, and running the way I really wanted to run with my platform, which is a non-political platform, but it's just basically running on me and running on my ethics, and running on my experience. The first time I ran, there's 4 other public defenders that ran. And although we weren't running together in a sense of that we were all, putting our finances together, sometimes we did have to pull our resources together. And I wasn't in direct control of necessarily what the message was for me, and what made me special, and what made me such a great fit for the bench. So it was a lack of control there. So I would definitely say, although you need support in an election, running by myself for me in an open seat was the best. In terms of, well, that's one thing I definitely learned. But I would say, like Judge Roberts said, in terms of getting your ducks in a row, I found that people were very willing to endorse you before you filed. And I got so many endorsements before I filed, especially when I ran the second time. Initially, when I ran the first time, I had said, if somebody said, no, thank you, I don't want to endorse you, I wouldn't get angry and I wouldn't challenge them. I mean, realistically, it's politics, nobody owes you anything. But I would say politely, perhaps say, are you endorsing me because there's something about me that you don't believe in, or is it because you have a pre-existing relationship with somebody else? And most of the time they would say, I have a pre-existing relationship. I said, well, thank you then in any event, and just keep me in mind. And when I ran the second time, almost everybody who had said pass on the first one said, absolutely, let's do it on the second one. So definitely get your endorsements before you file if you can, and get their signatures. I always carried a binder with, or a folder with signature form endorsements with me everywhere I went. Didn't matter where I was going, I'd bring it with me. So, but having said that, there needs to be an open seat, which is the difficulty.
And can I just clarify something? I did run it for an open seat. I didn't run for against a sitting judge. It was an open seat, and someone had reached out to a DA and said, hey, you should run for this seat. And I just challenged that person. The other thing I wanted to say is you reminded me of the long hours, because you have to go to so many events, multiple events a night, many times. And I have to tell you, I think I lost almost 20 pounds, which wasn't a bad thing.
I know
it's not a good thing to lose weight like that.
I think that's a pro for running,
that was all based on stress. So it was not healthy at all. So keep that in mind.
So then I have a final question, which is, I know that in a lot of counties, you sort of get tapped for these positions, and people tell you, oh, there's a position coming up, right? So how do you find out? How do you find out if there's an open seat? What are the concrete steps that you need to take, especially if you might not be tapped? Although Judge Roberts, I know that you were tapped, but still, what are the concrete? No, you weren't. Okay, the first time. Okay.
I was tapped to apply to be a commissioner.
Okay.
I was not tapped to run for a seat. That's what I was saying, that traditionally
Right.
Particular people in the district attorney's office, they were tapped. They were
Right.
told ahead of time about positions. I had no knowledge about that.
So that's my question for both of you. If you're not being tapped, then how do you find out, when there's going to be an open position? So you get your ducks in a row, you start working on the endorsements, you start getting everything set up.
Well, that's a problem, isn't it? You're not going to get tapped, and so you don't know. You don't want to go sit in somebody's seat while somebody's sitting in their seat. I guess that's how I've heard it put. So, if you go and ask the person, are you leaving? They don't have to tell you. And so it could be a waiting game and just wait till the other person files. I've seen it done in my county. I've seen other candidates just declare their intent, post on Facebook, I'm running for judge. And then, that forces the person who was tapped to go file or to also make a statement of intent so that things kind of sort themselves out. But that's more like a politics and strategy, which again, I personally didn't have any experience in that area for sure. In terms of deadlines, of course, the Department of Elections can be very helpful to brush up on your deadlines and what your rules are and the canons and all that. There's plenty else to do. And then, of course, for you to decide, am I really going to put my family through this? Am I really going to run? Am I really going to fundraise? You have to really take stock in what your personal resources are and stock in what your community resources are. And by personal resources, I don't mean just if the seat's going to cost $250 and you can only raise $150, are you willing to put in that $100 from your own money? Not just financial resources, but do you have the energy, physical and mental? Do you have the time? Do you have the charisma? Do you like speaking to strangers? If you don't, then it's time for you to work on that application. Maybe, I don't know. So.
One thing I would suggest, because especially if you do not believe that you will be one of the people tapped to be given a heads up on a seat coming open for election, is just to go to the voter registrar's office, and they can tell you what seats are coming up for election, what judicial seats will be available. And it's just a matter of you just being proactive and finding out and not waiting to hear from, someone posting it on Facebook or waiting to find out that your friend, a friend of yours or someone they've been tapped to run by some other judicial officers. Just be proactive and go to the elector's office yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that all of this information is going to be really useful. So now I want to just turn a little bit and now talk a little bit about commissioners and pro tems. And this will be Judge Roberts and Judge Rosie. So I'm going to ask you, Judge Roberts, and I know you were tapped for commissioner, but why did you decide to apply, just in general?
Well, I was approached to apply, but I also knew it was an opportunity to be the decision maker in the courtroom. And I felt that I was ready to do that too. I had served as a public defender, a civil litigation attorney, a sole practitioner, and then a prosecutor. And I felt that I was ready to be a decision maker, and having that opportunity present itself, even though I had my application in for a judge, I didn't want to just let the opportunity go. And so I'm so happy I applied and was appointed. And it was a great experience. It prepared me for what I am doing now. I just think every single day I learned, there's just always something to learn. And as Judge Evangelista indicated, I mean, it's an honor and a privilege every day to put on the robe and go out and help people and help them get to the next chapter in their life, or to put something that happened, something bad that happened behind them and get them on a new road. So it was an opportunity that I did not want to pass up. It was an opportunity to get on the bench and be a decision maker and to help people. And it's so important that our bench reflect the community that we serve. And I was the first African-American female ever appointed as a commissioner in the entire county of San Diego, which is still pretty crazy, really. And that was in 2008. And I'm happy to tell everyone, we just elected our latest commissioner, and she's African-American. And so she's the second one, but there had not, since I had left as a commissioner, there was no one else African-American on our entire bench as a commissioner. So that was also a reason I wanted to apply for the job, to have more representation. People can come into court and see people who look like them to handle their traffic ticket or their small claims matter or their family support case or their unlawful detainer matter. It matters to people who come into court that they see people who look like them. So it was an opportunity I didn't want to pass up at all.
Thank you very much, Judge Rosie. I know that you serve as Judge Pro Tem, and so I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to serve as a Judge Pro Tem in addition to your administrative judge position?
That's a good question. I actually became a Judge Pro Tem in San Francisco County first, doing unlawful detainers. And it was one of those, when the positions were opened up and you could apply for Pro Tem, I applied because I had a lot of mediation background from my work as an attorney. And once I became a Judge Pro Tem, I think it really sort of opened my eyes up to what the job really entails. And I say that, and I think I sort of am piggybacking on what Judge Roberts said, but the idea of being a judge, it's a great job, and I don't think any of us would say differently. It's a huge responsibility, and it may not be for everyone. And for me, this was a way of testing out whether I had the temperament for it. It's very different than being an attorney. It's very different than being an advocate. It requires a shift. And so for me, when I first started pro temping, it was because I think I was really testing out whether that was something I wanted to do and whether it was a fit for me. And then once I became an administrative law judge, I kept doing it for the reasons that Judge Roberts said. I think that the diversity matters on the bench. And once I shifted I did unlawful detainers for a couple of years, I shifted to traffic and small claims, which Judge Roberts will tell you is very different. And when we sort of talk about my ALJ position in a bit, doing traffic and small claims is very different than the kind of judging I do on a day-to-day. I mean, a high volume docket where there are 100 faces in front of you waiting to be arraigned by noon, is another skill set. And it was fun. And I felt like I was helping out my community, helping the judges on the bench in my county who are friends of mine. And it was a way of giving back and again, pushing myself to, in other ways, decision making on a faster scale. And it really is a lot of fun. And I know Judge Roberts said in her bio that she trains in bench demeanor. I don't think you can take enough bench demeanor courses. And so being a pro tem allows you to get more of that, even though I've been a judge for almost 13 years. I redo that training every 3 or 4 years when you're a pro tem. So I think it really just gives you a sense of whether this is a job that really is for you. Because it is, it's a lifestyle, as we'll talk about, and it's not necessarily for everybody. And so that's one of the reasons that I really looked into it and was honored to serve in San Francisco and now in Alameda County. So.
And then Judge Roberts, I'm going to come back to you, and the same types of questions we asked about running for election, are there pros and cons, or what should people think about if they're thinking about applying for commissioner or a Superior Court judge? In other words, does one lead to the other? Or should you start thinking about them separately? If you could just help advise the people who are listening to us.
Sure. I think in some instances, a commissioner could lead to being a judge. Not always. That was not my journey. I was a commissioner for 11 years. I think, especially in the last 2 administrations, we've seen Governor Newsom appoint commissioners, people who've been a commissioner for a year or 2 years or less. Governor Brown did that as well. So I don't think, I think it would be beneficial if you first decide if you want to be a decision maker. I don't think you should accept a job as a commissioner because, I'm only going to accept this because eventually I want to be a judge. You have to want to do this job because it is a difficult job, and it should be, because it's important. You're making decisions that affect people's lives. So it's difficult, and it requires courage. It requires you to be able to make a decision, notwithstanding what the police officer or the police officer standing in the courtroom are going to say about you, or in your courtroom, or as they walk out of the door, which has happened before to me. But you have to be able to make those decisions, notwithstanding what people are going to think about you, based on the facts and the circumstances and the law. And as Judge Rosi indicated, that you also want to make sure that you are aware of the fact that you will completely, and you have to completely strip yourself of being an advocate. You are now a neutral party. And so you no longer care about the outcome. You just want to make sure that the evidence that's supposed to come in comes in, the evidence that should not come in does not come in, that the parties get a chance to present their case, and that you make the decision. So not everyone will ultimately want to do that. So I just think the most important thing, whether you apply to be a commissioner or you apply to be a judge, is that you really think about whether it's something you want to do. You don't just want the title, you want to actually make those very, very difficult decisions. And so I think that's just so important. But having said that, if you do obtain a commissioner position, I do think it is incredible. it's an incredible opportunity to grow and learn to become a better decision maker every day, so that if you do become a judge and you're doing even more difficult cases, you have the temperament, you're used to making decisions under a lot of time pressure, where you have 100 people in a calendar. You're going to be able to handle fast-paced calendars more so than a judge who's been on the bench, who's never had to handle really high volume calendars. But because you've had that experience as a commissioner, they're going to be able to put you in any department because that's what you were doing. So I say that to say that my experience as a commissioner helped me tremendously, and helps me in my family law assignment that I have now, where I'm doing 15 restraining order hearings in the morning, one trailed to the afternoon, and then I had another evidentiary hearing, which is why I barely logged on at 4:35 today. But my experience as a commissioner has helped me. It's helped me to be able to control my calendar and to run my calendar. So, my goal, as I said, even with having the setbacks and not getting the judge position, is I just kept hunkering down and just doing the best job I could do, learning as much as I could learn. I love teaching, and that's why I love teaching bench conduct and demeanor, because you can never learn enough about that. You can never get enough of going through hypotheticals with people and challenging yourself and looking at, okay, maybe did I treat that person differently because of this, or do I have any implied, what biases do I have? Am I still recognizing? So it's a constant learning opportunity in this position, and it's just great. They're probably tired of hearing from me, so.
No, all of these are so helpful. Judge Rosie, I'm going to follow up with you. So what tips do you have for someone who might want to serve as a pro tem judge?
Well, I think it's first of all, I think it's an important first step. Like Judge Roberts was saying, you need to know if you can be a decision maker and you can switch roles. And so, I think it's a really important step for folks to take before either they run for election or they apply for the bench. I found my both of the pro tem jobs I've had the old fashioned way. Looking on the court's website. Some courts advertised when I got the first one in San Francisco, there was an advertisement in our local legal newspaper just saying that they were looking for pro tems, and the same in Alameda County. I know that some counties have the applications on their websites and it's sort of rolling. And so I would just say, look around in the counties that you live in and the county that you work in, if they are different places. For me, they were different places. And see if they're available. It was both were long applications, not as long as the Superior Court application, but long applications, some of the same questions. In both times I was interviewed back in the days when we could interview in person. And then you went through a lot of training, the bench conduct training. So be prepared to learn new things. I didn't know as much about traffic law as I do now. I didn't know as much about unlawful detainer or civil harassment restraining orders as I do now. That wasn't my background. And so, you learn a lot of new areas of law, which I think is great. And it opens you up to other opportunities. So, check the local website. That's really how, your court's website. That's really how I found it. Both of mine.
And here I'm going to make a pitch for Pro Tems, which is this is the perfect time to apply. Look at your local bar association, look at all these websites. And I do think that they are linked. Once you start serving as a Pro Tem and you like doing it, and the judges and other lawyers start looking at you all of a sudden as a potential judicial officer. So it's great as a stepping stone in that not only do you learn what the job is about, but other people may learn about you and start looking at you as a potential judicial officer. So what I'm going to do is we're going to ask the most important question. Okay. And this is the question that I sort of moved ahead because I think this is the best question. So with that build up, right? What advice would you offer to individuals who've been seeking a position on the bench and have encountered obstacles? And Judge Evangelista, I'm going to start with you first.
All right, I love this question so much. There's so much opportunity for redemption every time you have an obstacle. Like I just mentioned some of my obstacles that I had to overcome in my life and then in running. But look at the redemption now. Not only do I get to do an amazing job, it's a dream job, really. I have to say, and I don't know if there's any San Francisco Superior Court judges out there watching, that the judges have been so supportive and gracious and helpful, and they've enveloped me as a peer, even though I ran and I wasn't appointed. And that's the redemption, because I think because I did run so openly. When you're running, everybody gets to know everything about you. That there was that sense of transparency. But instead of telling you more about what obstacles I overcame in specific, I think that the ideal would be to maybe me give you like a format. I think that the first thing you'd have to do is ask yourself what kind of obstacle you're overcoming, and then try to assess it. Is it a valid obstacle? In other words, is it something that you have to atone for? Did you do something where you need to strengthen a part of yourself or your application? Or is it the kind of obstacle that's just not justified? Are you just being told indirectly that you don't conform to somebody else's image of what a judge should look like? Are you the victim of implicit bias? Have you been placed in a box and labeled with something that you're not? Or are you the obstacle? Are you holding yourself back? As you're running, are you running against the other person? Or is your mindset that you're both running towards the same thing? Is it that somebody else's microaggressions have gotten in your head and you're subconsciously affecting the way you carry yourself? So I would say, sit down and have that conversation and assess what the obstacle is. Figure out what it is to try to assess it, because the type of obstacle that there is going to dictate how you overcome it. For me, is I had my nose in a book for so long. I was somewhat of a loner, and at some point I had reached out to the National Hispanic Bar Association, and somebody else another female attorney had just run and won for judge. And I told her, I said, wow, it's so amazing that you did that. How did you do that? I feel so alone. She turned around and she looked at me and she goes, you need a posse. I said, a posse? Yeah, you need a posse. We'll be your posse. And then she rounded up some more women and some more Latinos. And then before you knew it, they'd all over the United States, they'd written me checks. They gave me endorsements. More than even that, is they gave me such encouragement, like there was no opportunity for failure. This was a movement all of a sudden. And that helped me overcome a totality of obstacles, just having that support. I mean, to have people that believe in you that way, you know, but you have to determine what it is for you specifically. What are your obstacles to then assess it? And there's always some clever out of the box solution there for you. And you may have to brainstorm it, but it's there, you know, and you're not alone.
Thank you very much. Judge Roberts?
I just want to say, Judge Evangelista, your story is just so touching. I wrote down when you said that your family had to live in a certain area in San Francisco to avoid being deported, your parents, and how awesome that 2 to 3 blocks from there, you're a judge in the Hall of Justice. It's just incredible. It's just an incredible story. So I'm sorry to get a little emotional, but I just think your story is amazing. I'm so happy for you. And then Kristen, you saying that, you know, your parents, you know, did not, you know, they kicked you out because they found out you were gay, and look at you, you know, it didn't stop you. You're an ALJ, you have the best job. And I remember you telling us that they asked you a question about, I forget what you said, the subject, and you said, I don't know anything about it, but you got the job, you know? And I think that it's so important for us to maintain our, you know, humility and to be humble and to not not react when we have the obstacles, to not react with bitterness or anger, but just to remain humble, just to remain focused and gracious. And one of the biggest compliments I received when I ran and I was not successful is that people felt that I was just so gracious in the midst of all of that. Afterwards, having to get on the bench the day after I did not win, you know, I just had to keep my head up. And so that's the one of the things I would say is, if you have applied for a judgeship or commissioner position to be a pro tem, you've tried to you've run for election and it didn't work out, is keep your head up. And notwithstanding what's going on, keep your head up, keep focused. It doesn't define you. Don't let it define you. Don't let the setback, the door being closed, define you. Just have it be a motivation to make you more determined to achieve your goals. Use it as a motivational mechanism, but don't retreat, and just don't internalize that. Because a lot of times if we internalize all the things going on, the whispers going on, then it would drive you crazy. And that's the other thing I want to talk about is there are times when this is one of the most frustrating parts about this journey for me is the unknown obstacles. I didn't know what was keeping me from getting the position. I just did not know. And this is one thing I'm so thankful about with Governor Newsom, that when he started, he appointed initially Justice Jenkins, and he appointed the local committees. He made it transparent. So it was no longer a secret of who was on these secret committees. They were really called secret committees. And some people knew who was on there, some people didn't, some people knew 1 or 2 names. And so if there were one or two people on there who, for whatever reason, didn't like you, or someone they knew didn't like you, you could just be kept in these committees forever. And I shouldn't say forever, I'm being dramatic, but you would not know what was holding you back. And so at least there's more transparency in the process, which it should be a transparent process, right? It shouldn't be a process where only a few people can affect whether or not someone has an opportunity to move further in the application process. So that having the unknown was an obstacle for me. And I remember having, and I don't know if any of it was bias, as you indicated, Judge Evangelista. It could have very well have been. I just didn't know, but I just kept saying, I'm going to just keep doing the best job I can do, and just hopefully let my work speak for myself. Do the best I could on my application. I mean, I read it over and over again, had people read it. And so I definitely would suggest that you have other people that you trust read your application, because you need another set of eyes to look at it. I agree with Judge Evangelista that it's so important to have a support group. There were many times where I said, I'm fine. I'm a commissioner. I love my job. I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. And there are people that just would not let me give up. And I just think I'm thankful for them that I had that support, that they believed in me. They would not even let me give up.
And Judge Roberts, we are so grateful that you persevered. Also, Judge Evangelista, too. I wanted to make sure that we also touched on Judge Rosie, because no, that's fine. But there was a question specifically directed to you, which is, what are the unique things about being an ALJ that people don't know about?
Okay, can I try and take a stab at the last question you asked first, and then I promise to talk really fast about why being an ALJ is amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What I want to say about the obstacles question is that I think that the obstacles and the hardships that we have all faced, and that all of us face, are actually important, because they are the reason why diversity on the bench matters. Because every single day we see people at the worst time in their lives, usually, right? If they're in our courtrooms, it's rarely, unless it's adoption day, it's rarely a good thing. And having people on the bench who have faced hardships in their own life, who know what it's like to struggle, who know what it's like to overcome them, and who know what it's like to ask for help, I think is really important. And so, I mean, for me, I feel like the more hardships and obstacles, the better a judge I make, really. And I think it's part of why I wanted to be on the bench, because I felt like those things, and that's really what we've been talking about for months, right? Is that why the diversity of the bench matters so much. And so that's what I wanted to say about that. And I will also talk quickly about administrative law judges, because they are sort of the secret judges that folks don't know anything about. If everyone remembers back in law school, when you took administrative law, or maybe you didn't take it because you didn't think it was important, that administrative law judges sit in the executive branch. So they are siloed either within an administrative agency, or in California, we have the oldest and largest central panel, which is just an agency that is, which is, just basically an agency of administrative law judges. The work that ALJs do is very similar to the breadth of work that is done by the Superior Court. So you have ALJs, for example, in EDD, who are doing unemployment, workers' comp. those ALJs are doing high volume work the way you would see in traffic or small claims. They are doing 7 to 10 hearings a day. They are fast paced. Most of the time they're on the phone or on video. Most of the people in front of them are self-represented. So it's a lot of, there's, certainly that high volume work being done by some ALJs. Other ALJs, like my position, I'm doing large trials. There's always at least 3 parties. Most everyone is represented, sometimes by 3 or 4 attorneys at every table. The cases take years to go through. There's, there's discovery, there's motions. In my courtroom, we have a live court reporter. I actually sit in a very large courtroom, bigger than, secretly bigger than some of the other judges on this call today. It's 1,600 square feet. It's really nice. And so, every ALJ, position is a little different. Some wear robes, some don't. We wear robes. Other agencies don't. And ALJs are subject to the California Code of Judicial Ethics, with and all of those canons, with the exception of one canon which we talked about earlier, and that is Canon 5, and that we retain our First Amendment rights that other judicial officers do not. But we are judges on and off the bench, just as most other judges are. Like I said earlier, it's really a lifestyle. But they are the secret best job in state service. I know I said that when we all got together, and it is still true. If you've heard me talk about ALJs at other panels, it is really the best job in state service. Best work-life balance, and it. I mean, we talked about this. Being a judge is a great job. It really is the best job.
Judge Rosie, I do have a question. Do you
Yes.
need to have a background, a subject matter background, to apply as for a ALJ position in that subject matter?
So you do not, and this is what Judge Roberts was hinting at earlier, I think. So I am now the chief ALJ, the California Department of Insurance, and we joked that when I first applied, they asked me if I had an insurance law background, and I responded by saying that I knew I had to have insurance, but that was the only insurance law I knew. And they still gave me the job. And 8 years later, I'm the chief. So, or 12 years, 8 years, I made chief. So you don't, I think it helps to have a background, for some things like workers' comp and EDD. I think that, for example, workers' comp judges tend to be workers' comp lawyers before. But just like on the Superior Court bench, you learn a new area of law. I don't remember Judge Roberts saying that she, had a family law background, but she's now sitting in family law. You can learn areas of law, and judges do it all the time. So you don't necessarily have to have a background in that area. For some jobs, I think it helps, but at the Department of Insurance, I'm happy to train, all our new judges on insurance law, and you can learn the area of law. It's a lot harder, I think, to make the transition from advocate to neutral than it is to learn a new area of law.
So Judge Rosie, how do you apply?
Great question. So you apply on the state's website. It's a multi-stage process. If you go to calhr.ca.gov, you can see the requirements for applying for ALJ positions. They are different in each state agency, but generally you need about 10 years of experience as an attorney, and then other experience depending on the type of ALJ position that you're applying for. And once you sort of get the idea of what the requirements are, if you go to calcareers.ca.gov, which is the state of California's employment website, you'll see that there's a way to take an examination. ALJ positions are all competitive civil service exams. So you need to take the exam itself, which is an application, writing samples, statement of qualifications, and I urge folks to really answer those questions thoroughly. There are a lot of the same questions that are on this Superior Court application. Why do you want to be a judge? What are your qualifications? What things have you done in the past? Once you complete the exam, it's scored and ranked by CalHR, and you'll get a letter saying your rank. And then once you have that, you can apply for any open positions, and you can find those on the Cal Career website as well. Just put in administrative law judge, hit enter, and you can see all of the agencies that have ALJs and who's hiring for open positions. And then you can go ahead and apply for that.
And
Recently,
Rosie, I
yeah.
think our time's up.
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me? So we don't have to have the somebody tell me.
Yes.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I have colleagues and friends texting me that they were in tears several times during our chat, feeling inspired. And I can't thank you enough, Your Honors, all four of you, for your sharing with us, and really just such heartfelt information. And it's so helpful. You may not think it is, but people are texting me like crazy saying how helpful it is to hear this information. So I really want to thank you.